God wants to talk to you when you are sober and when you have clarity and you can discern His voice at the moments of peace, at the moments of tranquility. Most important thing is to hear His voice and to respond to His voice. Hello, welcome back to Cactus Advent. As usual here at Cactus Advent, we are true to who we are, therefore reminding you to be you, to be unique and to be better. We are looking at how drugs affect our relationship with God. Drugs affect our relationship with God by diminishing spiritual clarity. And let's be honest, if you go and drink that Jack Daniels, that Chrome, that Martell, whatever alcohol it is, or that weed, the time you are hyped up, the time you are so away from your thoughts, at those moments, how will you connect with God? Because at that time, you cannot hear God's voice. That time, you have opened your mind to other influences or to other voices. And as we saw, drugs close the frontal lobe. And once they close the frontal lobe, they open a gateway to your subconscious mind, and you are susceptible to anything that you hear. So in that moment, when you are so high of yourself, you won't have that spiritual clarity, because God cannot speak to you when you cannot reason. And another way that drugs affect our relationship with God, drugs complement immoral behavior such as premarital sex. Imagine how many people get pregnant by one-night stands. You know how people even steal to get money for drugs. You know how people are willing to do anything to be high. And you know all the bad things that happen when people are on drugs. So drugs affect our relationship in that way. And another way is that drugs alter our priorities to God. When you make drugs your primary focus, you will negate the place of God. And God in Exodus tells us that we should have no other gods beside Him, because He's the one who brought us out of slavery, out of Egypt, out of serving our own bodies. He's the one who took us from there. And once you give drugs the primary focus, they will distract you from God. And that's why if you do drugs, you can't be going to church, or you can't be as active in church, because drugs have taken God's place. And God wants us to give Him His time, and He wants us to use His talent for His work. And another way that drugs affect our relationship with God is that we have diminished capability to love. You know, one of the things that I thank God that I have as a person is the capability to receive love and to give it out. Have you ever realized that people who take drugs have a high anger, or they get irritated easily? Because once you take the drugs, you feel good when you are high, but when the high wears off, you get to this place where you feel bad. And when somebody disturbs you at that moment, you can even hit that someone, although you didn't want to. In another way that I see drugs affect our relationship with God is that drugs weaken our faith in God. And as we saw, God allows us to go through hardships. And if Jesus went through hardships and He was killed innocently, as a Christian, there is no way you'll expect that you won't go through trials. But God promises us in those moments, when we have faith, that He will deliver us from those moments. That yes, indeed, He does deliver us from those moments. So if you take drugs at those moments when you're supposed to rely on God, it will weaken your faith, because you rely on drugs to solve your pain, to solve your misery, and you won't rely on God, so you won't trust God. And in those moments when you're supposed to trust God and see His faithfulness, you won't witness it. And another thing is that drugs affect relationship with God by having increased guilt and shame. Imagine how many people, single mothers, they are today because they went drunk and had that one night stand, and they keep blaming themselves over what happened that day, and there is nothing they can do it, and they keep having that guilt and shame, but nothing can be done to change the situation. And so many people die in their guilt and shame because they never go to God for the forgiveness, and they end up blaming themselves all the rest of their lives. And as we have seen, even drugs affect the people who should support you most. Drugs take you away from the social community. You hear drugs affect the people you deal with. You don't get along with your family as you should, because how will you get with people when you are drunk, unawatusi, how will you get along with those people? There is no way you'll get along with people as you should when you spend most of your time in drugs. And God wants us to be closest to our family. He wants us to be close to the people who are closest to us, but drugs take that relationship. And drugs even take true happiness. God gives the peace which surpasses human understanding. And drugs take away that peace, and it mimics true joy. But once you take on drugs, you'll be only peaceful, or you'll be only happy in the short term when you are doing drugs. But when you are done, you get back to being depressed. And that's why, as a Christian, that peace which you have, you cannot trade it for a temporarily high. And there are so many ways that drugs affect our relationship with God. But for those ones, they'll be enough for today. So my friend, if you are taking drugs and you're a Christian, know they're affecting your relationship with God. And drugs don't help you to solve your problems. That's why as a Christian, you should not do drugs. So until next time, my friend, be safe and avoid drugs, and know that God wants sobriety and wants us to be vigilant. Until next time, bye-bye. Join me next week as we continue this mind-blowing conversation right here.